Okay, so Mike, I've heard you say that the Dominion settlement was a victory for Fox because the anchors who promoted the lies won't be held accountable. And Rupert Murdoch will just pay a fine and be able to walk away. So, in your opinion, the settlement did not inflict enough pain on Fox. Would you agree with that?
I would. And you kind of, in many respects, kind of accept that with these civil litigations, because look, at the end of the day, Michael, you know this better than anybody, had this gone to trial and Dominion won, what would Fox do? They would immediately appeal. And then you would be off to the races with appeals. And then even if that failed for Fox, then you're trying to collect the money. The upside for Dominion is that day they agreed to the settlement, Fox stroked a check for $787 million. But at the end of the day, the question about how this impacts the behavior of the organization, does it work to change the political culture inside the organization? My answer is no. Why do I say that? Because they were doing this shit right before the trial. They didn't stop. Mm-hmm. They were still, Tucker Carlson was still on the air putting crap out, feeding the highest level of premium bullshit he could to his audience. So where do we think this changes the behavior of an organization that is now decided that its journalistic integrity doesn't exist, doesn't matter, but rather preys on its audience vulnerabilities, fears, and racism? At the same time, it's not taking any real financial hits.
Well, yes. Let's go back for a second, talk about what if hypothetically they went to trial, and what if hypothetically they lost the same amount of money or the full amount that they were going for, this $1.6 billion.
Right.
Let's assume hypothetically that they ended up with the 1.6 billion during after trial. And if in fact that Fox News wanted to appeal, it's very conceivable that plaintiff's counsel would demand that they post a bond. Mm-hmm. That's not cheap. That's a lot of money, and it's not easy to get a $1.6 billion bond. So they would have to do that potentially. Right. But at the end of the day, you're right. It takes forever, those appeals. There's a possibility that the judge who would be hearing the judges who would be hearing the appeal can always remand it back down to the lower court in order to reduce the amount, because it is a very significant amount. And I bring that up merely because they're not over when it comes to these lawsuits. Right. There's another lawsuit that's now lurking in the background. It's actually more than one. You also have a second similar lawsuit for $2.7 billion by Smartmatic. Correct. My hope is that once again, Fox resolve the issue with Smartmatic for whatever the amount is, but that Smartmatic state that unless you acknowledge the wrongdoing, unless that you have people like Fucker Carlson or Hannity or Ingraham or any of these other assholes come out and turn around and express some sort of an apology, not to declare it as a victory, then I think that they're not doing service. They're doing service certainly to themselves, but they're not doing service to society. That's for sure.
I agree. Well, first off, you've taken Tuckums to a whole nother level.
It's Fucker Carlson in this
Fucker book. Carlson. I cannot argue with that appellation. So number two, I think you're right. I think the country is owed an apology. I mean, I know that sounds so like what, but. And I know that's not necessarily the outcome in civil matters, civil litigation matters. But when you consider what, not just the Fox audience, in some respects, who gives a shit about them? You know, they want to believe crazy stuff, let them believe it. But the reality is the rest of the country suffered consequences because of that. January 6th, the back and forth, the incessant drumbeat of, you know, the election was stolen, and then just the vermin that grew up out of that, from, you know, what we saw and still see in places like Arizona to, you know, elsewhere around the country. Yeah, you kind of owe us an apology because you created all of this. It wasn't just what your audience heard. And again, they can believe whatever they want, but the rest of the country also paid a price for this. And the fact that we now know that your audience was lied to, that your host of the shows did not believe the crap that was being put on their airwaves by My Pillow crazy, Rudy Giuliani, people who pretend to be lawyers for Trump. We know now Tucker Carlson passionately hated Donald Trump. I mean, look, in all of our conversations, Michael, we never referred to the man as a demon. But no. Tucker did. Yep. Tucker did. And so his audience, you know, that audience is pissed at you and me because we don't like Trump and we say nasty things, but we didn't call him a demon, right? So this is the crap that I think needs to be atoned for in some way. And my concern is Fox hasn't learned that lesson. Because again, no. $787 billion is a rounding error. I know, yes, it's a lot of money by, you know, the highest judgment.
Not in Fox, yeah, not based in Fox. They're sitting with $5+ billion in the coffers to deal with shit, just in cash, just to deal with it. But you know, the part that bothered me the most about all of this, right? And there was a great article that was done in the BBC. They referred to this associate professor of history at Vanderbilt University. Her name is Nicole Hemmer. And, you know, this professor is in media, conservatism, electoral politics. She actually said something to the BBC that, I totally agree with it, that while Fox saved itself from a public trial, it had already been harmed by court documents that revealed the inner workings of the network. I bring that up, Mike, simply because their viewers already know that fucker Carlson and Hannity and the rest of these animals, that they were lying to them.
Yeah.
But yet, those same viewers remain loyal to Fox. They're still watching the same group of assholes doing the same thing. So it's one thing, you know, as they always say, right? If fool me once, shame on you. Right. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, shame on you. And I'm referring to these ignorant maggots that are so deeply entrenched into the bullshit of Trump. They suffer from that Trump derangement syndrome that they can't avoid watching Fox News for any other news source that would give them legitimate news of the day. They just can't do it. And it's a shame.
Yeah, look, that's the rub of the whole thing. And so if I'm Rupert Murdoch and I am the leadership running things in New York for Fox, I'm looking at my numbers and I'm like, where do we take a hit here? Tucker Carlson is handed the January 6th video, all the video from January 6th, and he refashions a bullshit narrative that he starts to feed his audience. We all know it's a lie. We all know what's coming. 4 million more viewers tune in to watch it. So if I'm sitting there again in management, I'm going, okay, that was a good week. Where is the price to be paid? How is the journalistic community going to deal with Fox? How is the political class going to deal with Fox? how are rank and file citizens going to deal with Fox? They are not going away anytime soon. They've not been diminished, to your point, because their audience is ride or die, Michael. It's ride or die with Fox. So, and Trump. So where does that leave us as we now set up the match for 2024?
I'll tell you where it leaves us. It should leave us all as really nervous because these people are so fucking stupid that they're willing to go out there, campaign, vote, donate their money to a guy who is not who he purports to be.
No, never
They're
has
going to continue to watch shows like on Fox News where you had the CEO, Rupert Murdoch, the network president CEO, writing in emails, right, about then President Trump saying he's increasingly mad, right? And I don't mean mad as in angry. I'm talking about like nuts, right? With fucker Carlson then turning around and saying, as you wrote, and this is not me, this is him saying it, he hates Trump passionately and that his presidency had been a disaster, right? I mean, we see these sort of comments that are made by these show hosts,
right?
And yet, as you just accurately put, the same viewership comes back and then some.
Yeah, and that's the ecosystem. And so narratively going into this cycle, the idea that we're somehow going to get something different in 2024 is just utter bullshit. It's not going to happen that way. That's not the plan here. Donald Trump, stop and think about just how locked in. Just take Fox out of it for a minute, Michael. Let's talk about the rest of the press. Donald Trump tells us he's going to be arrested on a Tuesday. Not the DA from New York, not anyone in the criminal justice system in New York, not a judge in New York, Donald Trump. And what happens? We spend an entire fucking weekend talking about the upcoming arrest of Donald Trump on Tuesday. There are stories, they're special, they're breaking news, there's all this crap. Tuesday comes, Donald Trump ain't arrested. But Donald Trump made $1.5 million between that Friday and that Tuesday.
So he says, because now they claim that he's up to $17 million post the indictment is a direct result.
I'll take his word for it. I'll take his word for it.
I wouldn't take his word on anything. But I do acknowledge that he raised money.
Right. The point is, he's raising money. It could be $1, it could be $1 million, whatever it is. He's raising money off of this. But that's even the point. The point is that, as I asked on my air at MSNBC and I asked in Twitter, who told y'all this was going to happen?
Yeah.
The three-ring circus leader did, not the DA. So this is the environment we're in. And if we think we're going to be invulnerable to the same things that we were in 20 and in 16, we're fooling ourselves because we've already got a press that's primed to jump. And we've got audiences from Fox to elsewhere that are primed to jump. And so Trump knows that, and he's going to use it. He's going to play it. Now, it doesn't speak to what the outcome of the 2024 elections will be. But what I'm saying is y'all just need to hunker down with a good bourbon and get prepared because it's the bullshit train is running.
Yeah. Well, look, going back to Nicole Hemmer, her comments are particularly astute. She says, and these are, again, her words, it's pretty hard to prove defamation in the United States. That's a very true statement.
It's very true.
Here she goes on and she says, all Fox has to do is continue to spread election lies, conspiracies, and falsehoods without naming a particular company or person, and there's no risk of lawsuits in the future. The settlement will just make them better about not putting things on paper behind the scenes. That's pretty scary. Then there was a professor as well from my alma mater, American University there in D.C. Her name is Jane Hall. She says that it'll be difficult for Fox to escape the ugly embrace the network has with Donald Trump if it wants to avoid suffering in the ratings war against its further right competitors. And that's right. I mean, the reason, this is her words, that they promoted the lie about the 2020 election, even though their hosts had been found to have believed he was lying, they knew their ratings would go down and they'd be abandoned by Trump loyalists. It goes right back to the people, right? So while Fox is responsible for the regurgitation and the promotion, right, and the promulgation of these lies, the bigger problem are the people who are being lied to want to be lied to. This is a real problem.
It is. It is. So stepping back to the point that Nicole made, which is absolutely right. Fox is going to be better at doing this the next time. The other thing that, in addition to what she described with respect to what they put on paper and texts and emails and the story, how they cover the stories, is that the guests that they have on that are perpetuating the lies, all they have to say is, well, if that's true, done. Right? If they had said that, if the lawyers at Fox had told their on-air hosts that when Miss Powell or Rudy Giuliani or whomever is spewing garbage and lies that they know to be lies because we have the evidence that they knew it was lies, all they had to say when the segment was ending, well, Rudy, if that's true, then boom. That little bit saves you $787 million because to your very...
787.5. That 0.5 is a lot of money too.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I'm not going to begrudge that. But to your good point, that would have saved them that money, and it now sets up the roadmap for what they can do and will likely do in the next round. Because to your first point, proving defamation is hard, and all it takes is just a few nuanced words, language that will get you off of that hook.
I want to go back to Professor Jane Hall at AU for a quick second.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the Trump cult ever believing anything different?
No. Why should they? I mean, you tell me, Michael, you, again, more than all of us inside that bubble before it became the kind of bubble that it is now, the people around him, and certainly the audience that he built over the 14 years he was on TV, where did we see a break? This is a man who stood before the nation in the face of damning video evidence of his desire to grab women by their private parts, and he went on to win 52% of women voters. So you tell me, I don't. Where's the incentive to get off of it?
No. He didn't get 52%.
Yes, he did. In the
voters.
2016 election. In the 2016 election, he got 52% of the white female vote. In the 2020 election, he got 48%, or almost 50%. White suburban women buy that shit all day long. It is, and the data is very clear. So, as I say to Democrats all the time, their problem at the end of the day in every election cycle is the white suburban female voter. Period. We saw it played out with the Youngkin race here in Virginia. He won that race because white suburban women in Northern Virginia voted for Youngkin. Why? Because they believed the CRT bullshit that their sixth grader was learning critical race theory at an elementary school level. So the reality of it is despite everyone who claims they swing away from Trump, invariably in some way or form, they circle back. It is that mindset that says, oh, well, I don't like when he says these things, and I think he's vulgar, and I really don't like X, but I like his policies. Okay.
What policy?
What one? And when you vote for his policies, thereby voting for him, what do you think you're going to get first? All the shit you claim you don't like. Because the first point, what policies? So there we are. So this is what I warned folks in the 2022 cycle. What do you think happens if you give Republicans power back in the House? What do you think happens? Well, guess what? I said what happened is happening. There's no policy here. There's no plan going forward. It's all about the crazy bullshit that Jim Jordan is spewing out, claiming he's going to haul somebody's ass in front of his committee that he has no authority to haul in front of the committee, wasting a lot of money, time, and energy. But that's the point. This is all about retribution. You know that. You are a victim of that self-same retribution, right? So where does it get better? They're still coming after you, Michael. I mean, your shit is technically done. And what happens last week? They are back in with another lawsuit. Like, I'm sitting there reading that going, so what does brother do now?
You know what I do? I defend it.
Right.
And I countersue, and I hold him accountable, which is something that I have been doing, whether it was via my testimony before the House Oversight Committee, which the AG then used to launch her case, or coming in and speaking to the district attorney, time and time again, and appearing before the grand jury. It's all to hold Donald Trump accountable. And I don't care what any of these folks say, oh, this is all revenge. It's all revenge. No, it's not. This is not about revenge. This is merely about holding him accountable. And if in fact his supporters want to declare it that's what it is, good for them. And look, well, I have a lot. There's a lot of support
Michael,
behind this.
That's the most expensive revenge in the world. If that's your motivation, and I agree with you. People, that's such an easy one-off to say. Oh well, he's just being revengeful. Well, where does he gain on that? Where do you gain on that?
I gain nothing. I gain nothing. In fact, I've gone now to the American people, those people who are cheering me on and supporting me, with a GoFundMe for the sole purpose, every single dollar, unlike Donald Trump. And then, of course, there's all these bots and these bot farms that Elon Musk promised that he would get rid of, which they don't, and they try to change the narrative. Oh, you're a fucking grifter. Look at you asking the American people to lay out money for you for legal fees and so on. Unlike Donald Trump's super PAC,
right,
where 90% of all the money that comes in, he has total discretion over. He wants to use it to buy himself another airplane, he could. He wants to buy himself a Bugatti, he could do that too. And it's absolutely legal for him to do that because it says it in the super PAC papers. 90 cents of every dollar he could use for himself. 100% of all of this money that goes into this GoFundMe only goes straight to lawyers. In fact, I didn't set it up. It was set up by American Patriots, by Adam Parkmenko, and I thank him for doing that. And the funds go directly into the lawyer's account. I never touch it. I never see it. All I do is turn around and to say, which lawyers get to keep the funds because it's predicated on their bills. Short of that, it's not for me. It's for all of us. It's for accountability on not just this lawsuit, but accountability of Donald J. Trump. But, I've read a lot of things going back to that 52% statistic. I've read so many different articles. Time Magazine actually had an article on it where it said that number is actually not accurate, that it's 52% of white women, right? That's the statistic that Donald said, whereas the Pew Research Center with the exit polls that came out post that, it was actually 47%, which is still an enormous number. Enormous. I don't care, 47%, 52%.
Look, if you want to grab women by their private parts,
right?
If you want to grab women by their private parts and their response is to still vote for you, 47% versus 52%. Fine, we can add that argument over the statistics, but it's still a significant number of women in suburban America that are still inclined to give their vote to someone like Donald Trump. And so
Mike,
that is a reality of the electorate, and we've got to take that into consideration when we're looking at these races.
Hey, Mike, do you think that coming up in 2024, if by chance Donald is the Republican nominee, that same 47 to 52% of white women will still vote for him, especially now what's going on with Roe v. Wade, especially what's going on with now the issues with mifepristone and so on? How much more do these people have to get kicked in the uterus before they understand that this man is a fucking nightmare to women's rights? And I don't care if it's not just isolated to reproductive rights, to big government now inside your bedroom and making these types of decisions. It goes way past just reproductive issues.
I would agree with that analysis on the front end. My instincts on this politically would be, if I'm Donald Trump, and it would not surprise me because he's done this on the Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security front, is to take a softer position than the GOP has taken writ large. That he will argue. Why would he argue this way? Because he, before now, was a pro-choice Democrat. And so I try to keep all my good little Christian Republican conservatives, mindful of the fact that you're supporting a guy who was not an ally in the fight. But rhetorically, he does well. The reality of it is, I think, Donald, that truth that you just spoke is not lost on him. I think that he will go into this campaign with a softer message on abortion, not arguing, as Lindsey Graham and some state legislatures have argued for, what effectively amounts to a national ban. So I think that there will be, because otherwise you're absolutely on point in terms of what the response is going to be, coupled with, Michael, the types of storylines that are coming out around guns right now is also devastating for Republicans. It's devastating. They may put on a brave face with the NRA and all of that, but the reality of it is, when a young black man is shot twice, once in the head because he rang a doorbell, a young white female is killed because she was making a U-turn and pulled into someone's driveway to do so. When a young cheerleader is shot because she
gets into the wrong car.
Gets into the wrong car.
What about the little girl and the father whose basketball rolled onto a guy's property? We are all so fucking gun crazy today. This stand your ground nonsense. A fucking basketball. How many times as a kid did your basketball end up on your next door neighbor's property?
Oh my God. Yes.
Could you imagine? You wouldn't have arms, legs. You wouldn't have, you'd just basically be a head.
Right.
On a skateboard.
So these storylines are not working for Republicans. And as much as some in the leadership want to downplay, soft pedal, move off of some of these, they won't be able to. If Trump comes in, as I think right now, until someone tells me and shows me they're prepared to lose the primary in order to win that general election, he's the nominee. I don't care who it is. He's the nominee.
But Mike, there's a bigger problem here. There really is. There's a bigger problem here. I'm not so sure that Trump can actually soft pedal the whole issue of abortion,
He may not.
Roe v. Wade, and Dobbs. I don't think so. Because let's not forget, he's still trying to win back the evangelicals, many of whom have decided that now that they've gotten their Supreme Court, that they don't really need him anymore.
I know.
And certainly he doesn't, right? Ain't that a bitch is right.
Ain't that a bitch?
Right. You know, so he may not soft pedal on that issue because he's trying to keep them in the Trump camp as well. But let me ask you this question. Are Republican lawmakers looking for a Trump off-ramp? I mean, if so, why haven't they taken any of the thousands of opportunities that they've already had? I mean, look, Trump is a proven loser. So the sooner that they dump him, the better it is for the party. He lost, right? He lost in 2020, right? He cost them the Congress in 2016. On top of that, he lost them, I don't even know how many countless seats in the Senate as well in 2020. You know, how many people that he had backed ended up losing. I'm not so sure that he's the big winner that he's trying to make himself appear. So why the fuck haven't they just dumped him?
Because the base is still with him. And the base will turn on them faster than they'll turn on Donald Trump. If my base tells me if you don't get behind Trump, you will be primaried, and a Marjorie Taylor Greene character shows up in your primary, your outcome becomes very problematic for you as an incumbent Republican. So instead of creating a concerted effort where you look at the landscape, and I did this in 2010, I looked at the landscape when I started getting some of the crazies popping up in the Tea Party world, like, you know, I'm not a witch, Christina. And I said, okay, there's some seats where I'm going to go fight, and other seats I'm just going to have someone else die on that hill. You got to make the choices, and you got to say without hesitation, we are not going there because this is not who we are. There's no one in leadership that's prepared to stand up and tell these motherfuckers to shut up and sit down, and to say, you know what? I get all this love for Trump. Y'all represent about 30% of the vote in a primary because there's 70% of Republicans out here who don't even participate in primaries. They give up. The reason they give up is because they look at it and say, it is such a hard right edge. They're like, I just participate in the general election. What you've got to do is re-educate those voters with good, solid candidates to give them a reason to come out and participate in the primary. Those lanes are there. But you've got to be willing as a candidate to go toe-to-toe, mano-a-mano with the Trumpists and say, look, this ain't your game, baby. You are irrelevant to the process. In fact, you are wholly a danger to the process, to this country. And the leadership wants to go here because that's where the governing majority lies. That's where the future of the party and the country is. No one's doing that. Michael, last week, this was Nikki Haley's attack on Donald Trump. A memo to her high-end donors calling out Donald Trump. Really? That's your attack? You're gonna send out a memo? So come on. I mean, really, where is the energy here to do this? Asa Hutchinson, God bless him, is the only one who's kind of sounding that note. But there is no traction there. Isn't that unbelievable? It's unbelievable. No one's galvanizing behind him to help him with the messaging.
Well, hold on, Mike. They are a party right now of maggots and big mouths. Look at what Marjorie Taylor Greene did to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, screaming, calling him a liar, right? Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, she accused him of having an extramarital affair or
she
something
thrown all
like
kind
that.
Of shit out there.
I mean, I first of all, if I'm not mistaken, she's the one with the extramarital affair, and that's not a lie. That's actually something that I think she's actually even proud of. But it brings me to my question, because you've been a Republican for 45 years now,
right?
And not to give away your age,
no, right?
Man, but you know, it's all right. But you were also, right, the former chair of the Republican Party. And recently, you've come out and you've said that the Republican Party is irredeemable.
Yeah.
Are you still registered as a Republican? And if so, why?
I am because A, it pisses them off that I stick around.
That's one reason not to do it, but all right.
Right. B, look, man, this is where my journey began politically. You know, as a young kid growing up in Washington, D.C., making a conscious decision to join the party of Lincoln at a time when that was not what you did, certainly not as a young black man in a city like Washington. I say to all of these latecomers, these wannabes, these fake conservatives, you haven't walked the walk. You had it easy. You're in a post-Reagan, post-Bush environment, right? A post-Rush Limbaugh environment. You don't know what a wilderness is like. You don't know what it's like to actually have to make the case for your values, to make the case for your principles, and to align that with policies that are embraced by the American people. You don't know what that fight is like. If you want to get a taste of what it was like for me, it was 2010 on healthcare. I didn't need to talk about Barack Obama's birth certificate when I could sit there and talk to the country about the role of government in your private life. And here we now have these motherfuckers out here telling young trans kids that they can't get health care treatment, telling women that if you leave the state, we're going to call you a felon and prosecute you because you want to leave the state to have an abortion, telling young black kids your history cannot be taught because we don't approve of it. So that's not the party that I grew up in and worked in and advocated on behalf of. So part of me is like, I just can't go out that easily. I still got enough fight left in me to say, this ain't it. Everybody claims they want, we need a viable two-party system, but then you're telling me to give up on at least one of the parties to that system. So how do you fix it? It's easy to stand outside and throw stones at it and bitch slap the party. It's not going to do. It's a lot harder to stay inside and try to reform it. Now, I ain't altogether crazy. I know, Michael, that there comes a point, and we are damn close to it, right? Where you say, and I agree, this iteration is irredeemable. So the question is, lay down the predicate for a new narrative, right? Hope that you can build momentum for that, and then go from there. If not, then you walk away. But I at least want to leave the mark. I want to hold the mirror up to the party and say, look at your bastards. Look at you. This is who you've become. This is who you have allowed yourself to become because of Donald Trump. And that, for me, right now, is the most important thing to do. And then I say, well, okay, I leave. Where do I go? I'm still a conservative on a whole lot of things that doesn't fit inside the Democratic Party because they're not welcoming of some of the views I hold as well. But
they're not supposed to. By the way, in all fairness, I bet you and I, listen, I've been a Democrat my whole life, but I'll bet that you and I are probably more similar in our ideology than you would even believe. We're both fiscal conservatives. We're both social moderates, right? So what makes me a Democrat and you a Republican? I look, again, I've got real problems with what the Republicans are doing right now in regard to women's choices. I have a real fundamental problem because once they start doing that, we're into a whole new area now of violation of people's rights. And this is going right to the Handmaid's Tale. This is fucking Gilead, or as close to Gilead as we're ever going to see. And then this bullshit with legitimate gun control regulations and so on. I used to have a full carry here in New York. And I can tell you, they put me through the ringer in order to get that full carry, the concealed carry. And of course, now I lost it as a result of Trump getting his pecker pulled by a porn star. But at the end of the day, this is bullshit. When we start to love our children and our friends' children and our fellow citizens' children as much as we want to love an AR-15, all right, then somebody will turn around. I don't care which party that you're in. I don't care if you're not in any party at all. When you start to love your kids and others' children and human life more than you love the right to blow the shit up out of something with an AR-15, then sensible gun legislation will change. But since we're on this topic of you being the Republican and so on, that, for example, Nancy Mace comes across to some, right, as a normal Republican. But this week alone, she made some pretty fucking weird stuff, including this video accusing President Biden. Get a load of this shit, right? This is the one that they call a normal Republican. She puts out a video accusing President Biden of being involved in a prostitution ring.
Yes.
I mean, there's absolutely no evidence to support it.
No.
But who are the good Republicans in your opinion? And what do you think, for example, of like Tim Scott?
Okay, so let's deal with Mace first. So Mace is likely is likely getting a lot of shit from the positions that she's taken challenging the party over the past year. And with the electoral cycle coming on fast and furious, this is what it sounds like when you try to avoid a primary. This is what it sounds like when you try to hold together a base which is lessening its grip on holding you. So yeah, Joe Biden is now very much like Hillary Clinton was running a child porn ring out of behind in the back room of a pizzeria. The pizzeria. Yeah. The president of the United States, in all the things he has to do, all right, that keeps him busy, that keeps him in the public eye, has found time to do this. So I'm so freaked out. I'm so freaked out by people like Nancy Mace and this bullshit with the prostitution rings and all that nonsense. I mean, it's really this is not a joke anymore. And the funny thing is, if Democrats turned around and claimed that Donald Trump out of Mar-a-Lago is operating a prostitution ring, or that, in order for him to stay young and vibrant. Right than wrong.
Well, honestly,
I mean, he has a history. So what can I say?
Look, not of prostitution, and running rings and prostitution, and we shouldn't. It's just that would not be true. And it's funny, when I was testifying before the House Oversight Committee, I love how the Republicans' famous line with me, well, you're a convicted, perjurer. You're a convicted liar, and so on. Well, was I lying when I said that Donald Trump never hired prostitutes in Russia, to the best of my knowledge, to piss on the bed simply because Obama and Michelle and Barack had both slept in that bed? Or when I turned around and I stated emphatically that there's no video of Donald beating up Melania, in an elevator or anything like that? Was I lying then? Or am I only lying when there are things that you want to say about me to defend your Führer from things that he is legitimately responsible for? But when they start with this bullshit of prostitution rings and all that, it's not true.
Well, it's
and
not
it
true,
would be wrong, but it would be wrong for
true,
Democrats to do the same, to do the same thing. But this is becoming normalized in the Republican Party. And I don't know how to stop it.
But understand this, it's not just becoming normalized in the Republican Party, it's becoming normalized across the spectrum. Because I keep telling people, while everybody is out there, sort of whack-a-moling Republicans, the reality of it is, this is America. All those new voters that voted for Trump between 16 and 20, they weren't just Republicans, because there aren't that many Republicans in the country that would amass to 72 million voters. So the reality of it is we have to understand that our political system has corroded our humanity, has corroded our connection to one another, which is why we now shoot children when they come to our doors. This thing is bigger than the politics now. The Frankenstein monster was one thing. The aftermath, the effect of the Frankenstein monster is that we see a boogeyman around every corner. We see a boogeyman in every face that we see. I look at you and I'm like, I don't like you because you're white. I don't like you because you wear glasses. I don't like you because you live in another neighborhood. I don't like you because you went to a different school. That's not how the country was built. And it was some, fucked up, beginnings for the country, no doubt. But in the main, over the course of history, we figured out how to make the pieces work, and where the stuff was still fucked up, we tried to fix it. Now, Michael, there's no incentive to do that. No. It goes to the exact same thing you just raised with Nancy Mace. Why is she claiming the President of the United States is running a damn prostitution ring? On what does she base that? Well, she bases it on nothing, but what drives it and makes her capable of saying it, or even required to say it, is that she's standing in fear of the very same people I just described who hate everything and everyone that now make up America.
Yeah, could you imagine it's going to be like this? Ding dong, who is it? Girl Scouts, hold on one second, I got to get my shotgun. I mean, that's how fucked up that we're really becoming, right?
Yes.
All of a sudden it's like, hey, Avon, 1 second, hold on, I'm just loading my AR-15, don't move. I mean, this is how fucked up it is. A basketball on a guy's lawn, or, somebody opens up a door to a car. How many times have you opened up a door right into to a car, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, it's the same car that I have. I mean, right. Especially if on a rent, it's beyond. Now, let me just go one step further, because I hate to say it, but your entire Republican Party right now, I mean, there's one guy or one person more fucked up than the next. And I just got to take that into Ron DeSantis. I mean, this ass fuck, all right, is threatening Disney by saying that he's going to build a prison next to Disneyland in Florida, right? He knew that now that he can't fuck them up with the money and the taxes and all that. So now he's threatening to build a prison right next door to Disneyland. He's basically calling for their eviction. I mean, this is not normal shit. DeSantis is part of the growing anti-business wing of the Republican Party.
Yes.
What are they hoping to accomplish? And is that the sort of rhetoric that's now popular with GOP voters?
I think it remains to be seen in the main if it's popular with GOP voters outside of places like Florida and other areas in the Deep South, which ironically, some of the poorest states are in the country are all Republican majority, Republican led, and taking an anti-corporate attitude is not the smartest thing in the world to do. So I'm not sure exactly how that necessarily will play out. But what you are getting with the likes of Ron DeSantis is this: I am a better version of Trump. You'll like me better because I look better, I sound better, I'm smarter, I dress better, my hair isn't yellow and all over the place. And the reality of it is, as he's finding out, Michael, that's not enough. I mean, he's now got 7 or 8 members of the Florida congressional delegation who endorsed Trump, one of whom had a meeting, I think a couple of whom had a meeting with Ron DeSantis a couple of days ago when he was here in D.C., left the meeting and endorsed Trump. So all of this performative bullshit that individuals, especially ones like Ron DeSantis, are doing, are gaining them no favors and no voters. His numbers are at the latest poll I saw had him somewhere between like 21%, 22%. Donald Trump dropped from 51 to 47. Okay.
Oh, my God, Mike, do you not have anybody in the entire Republican Party who is a decent human being, who's not fucked up walking around with AR-15 lapels, right, and so on, or wanting to stick a prison right into Disneyland's asshole, right? I mean, do you not have somebody who has some empathy, as opposed to a Donald Trump? The fact that Trump is 1, DeSantis is 2, then you got someone like a Chris Christie who's at 2%. You have somebody like Mike Pence, who, by the way, I am no fan of Mike Pence, at 2%, right? What about people like, an Adam Kinzinger? Why is it that he couldn't be somebody that the Republican Party gets behind? Do you have to be a crazy lunatic asshole coming up with wild shit to make it, to the Republican Party?
You've got to appease two things. You have to appease Trump and you have to appease his base. That's what you're seeing. So an Adam Kinzinger, I would love to see a Liz Cheney jump into this thing. She won't. They ran her out, not only ran her out of leadership, they ran her out of Congress. They declared she was no longer Republican. I wish some motherfucker would try to tell me I'm no longer Republican. I got something for you. But the reality of it is that's what you got to deal with inside the party. And the truth of the matter is Ron DeSantis believes he can play that card. This is the guy who got punked by Mickey. This is the guy who, instead of having sycophants go out from his administration and people in Florida are saying that, Bob Iger should be afraid of DeSantis and try to figure out how to get back in his good graces. Ron DeSantis need to be concerned about and worried about Bob Iger taking Mickey's other foot and shoving it up his ass. Because the reality of it is, if Iger tweets out 10 minutes from now that upon further evaluation, they've decided to make no further investment in the state of Florida, and that they are now looking to shut down some of its operations on the very land that DeSantis is pitching a bitch about. Watch what happens to corporate Florida.
Mm-hmm.
When all of a sudden, and all those little sycophantic legislators who keep piling on the bullshit that DeSantis is putting out there, watch what they say when suddenly that $475 billion worth of added in revenue that's created for Central Florida, the $75 billion in tax revenue that the state gets from Disneyland, and the over 72,000 employees that work directly, and the 400,000 employees that are employed otherwise, all that starts to shut down. What do you think corporate Florida is going to do? And what do you think the ripple effect of that will be in other jurisdictions looking at the anti-corporate Republican approach?
The entire Republican Party would get decimated because the tax consequence to Florida would be so staggering. Everyone's real estate tax, as an example, would at least double, if not triple.
Has to.
I'm thinking, Mike, the only way, right, to sort of show how ridiculously stupid this Republican Party has become. Let's assume that you, Michael Steele, right, decided that you were going to run for the presidency. What you would need to do, and this is going to sound crazy, but I really mean it, you need to shave your mustache into a Hitler stash, right? You need to, like Clayton Bigsby of David Chappelle, right, the only black white supremacist, you need to put on a Nazi uniform, walk around with an AR-15, you need to blow up, right? Seriously, in a commercial, you would need to blow up a synagogue, a mosque, right, and so on, whereby you're doing it basically while Jesus is sitting on your right shoulder telling you that what you're doing is right. Then you would have a real chance with Trump's base. And I know how fucked up and crazy. It's almost as crazy as that Chappelle skit, right? Again, with Clayton Bigsby, right? Which is just comical. And if you haven't seen it, I certainly recommend you YouTube it because
good.
It is classic, right? That's about the only way that you would get through to these, to these fucking lunatics. Because again, none of this shit makes any sense to me. But I do want to ask you while we still have time, right, what's your take on the two Justins of Tennessee 3 fame? I mean, do they give you hope for the future of the civil rights movement?
They do. On so many levels. Look, I've said for a while now, Michael, that the Gen Z generation of young men and women who are now coming into their own politically are going to do politics differently in this country. We've already seen it in the state of Florida after the Stoneman Douglas shooting with David Hogg and his classmates, who actively pursued change. They sat in and outside of legislative offices waiting for members to show up who refused to meet with them. And one of them said, well, you got to come to work at some point, right? And they sat there. That level of activism we have not seen since the 1960s, where issues mattered so much to that generation that it wasn't just about the protest, it was actually about evoking the change. So I do have hope. What I saw and witnessed in Tennessee with those two young men was the white Southern male legislative body telling these two African-American gentlemen that they were too uppity, that they had become too uppity, and that and their tactics and their antics were not appreciated, and that we would teach you a lesson. What was even more profoundly important was the citizens that they represented came out and said, fuck you, legislature. We're sending them back, and we dare you not to seat them. This battle is going to go on. I'm encouraging more and more of this generation to saddle up and get in. Don't wait for permission to run the race, to make the change. You need to follow the example of Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. You need to follow the example of Maxwell Frost. You need to follow the example of a young Republican environmentalist who is changing the nature of the game by dispelling the bullshit that the party has put out there, and that's Benji Baker. You have examples of this new leadership that is emerging, and so I have a lot of hope that they will change the game and they will do it differently. Because, to be quite honest, the rest of us have done a poor job.
I mean, it's not really any different than, I forget who the guy was, but he came out there and he basically attacked Tim Scott for being too white, sounding too white, which is how he got into, I think it was like Bowdoin College or wherever it is that he went. I mean, this is really, it's a sickness. There's a real racial sickness in this country, and I'm with you on the two Justins, and I couldn't have been more proud of the communities standing with these two young men, who were doing the right thing. When is it the wrong thing to turn around and to comment about the death of young people by gun violence? I can't believe that they would actually go this far because somebody wanted to protest the fact that there is not sensible gun legislation. Throw them out from their positions and think that it's justified. I truly, my friend, I just don't get it. But look, as we are now coming to the end of the hour, and Mike, I told you early on, the hour goes by quick when you and I are having fun.
I know,
here.
man. I know.
How do you predict that this argument over the debt ceiling is going to go? And what does a win for America look like?
A win for America looks like a clean debt ceiling bill where both sides agree that the most important thing is to avoid default in an economy that is already trying to reestablish its footing. Yes, interest rates have come down. Interest rates, inflation has come down. Interest rates are probably going to be held steady, although there may be a slight increase in the fall. Other prices are beginning to stabilize. The last thing the economy needs, the last thing the American people needs, but more specifically, those blue-collar workers out there who live paycheck to paycheck, who are trying to make it moment to moment, need is for this Congress to fuck this up and to play the same old bullshit politics that they always play every single time. You know you're going to have to raise the debt ceiling. Why? Because you're spending too much damn money, right? And like every other brother and sister out here in America, our credit card has a maximum number on it. And when you exceed that number, if your creditor is prepared to increase it, they will, right? But it's incumbent on you to recognize you can't continue to spend to that new number. So if spending is such a priority for these Republicans right now because they're out of the White House, right, and have half the power in the legislative branch, then make that the priority and in future budgets, put the same spending priorities in place that the speaker laid out the other day, tagging that to this conversation to pay a bill that's already due, to pay for expenses that have already been created, right? And he knows, McCarthy and every Republican in the House knows it's nothing but a bullshit argument.
I mean, could you imagine his comment? He goes, well, if your child has a credit card and he maxes it to the limit, do you just increase the limit? And you sit there. The problem with these assholes is that they don't understand that the comments that they made 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it's easy to go back to the tapes like Warren Wolf used to say. Let's take it to the video. Right. And they show these people talking about when Trump needed to raise the debt ceiling, which he did 3 times. Yep. Democrats didn't fight him on it because you're right. The full faith and credit of the United States government has to be paramount to anything else. All of this political wrangling. He sits there and now they want to stand on some sort of a footing claiming, well, this is crazy. How could you possibly allow Joe Biden to raise the debt ceiling, which should be his first time doing so. Right? I mean, let's be fair about this. 3 times your Fuhrer did it. Nobody said a goddamn thing because they cared more about the country. The Democrats care more about the country than scoring political points against Trump, who, by the way, raised it more than any other president or all other presidents combined. What was he? He's over $7.8 trillion.
Right. And so that's what we're paying for. That's why the debt ceiling is being raised, because we spent the $8 trillion under Trump. And of course, the $2 trillion that Biden had to spend to get the COVID issue under control, et cetera, et cetera. So that $10 trillion has to be accounted for somewhere. You don't just get to wish it away. And keep in mind that the self-same Republicans were responsible for the last government shutdown, right? Because the Democrats, to your point, said, no, we don't want to cut. Cutting spending is not going to solve the current debt problem that we have, which can only be solved if you increase the debt limit, unless you've got a magical $7-8 trillion sitting around in your pocket. You can just go pay down the debt. In which case, you don't have to raise.
Maybe Rupert. And maybe Rupert's got it sitting around. Yeah, call Rupert. Listen, Mike, thank you for joining me and my listeners.
Man, it's always a pleasure, man. We have fun together.
It's great. Yeah, it's great seeing you. Keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing. Hopefully we'll spark enough Republicans out there to at least vote Democrat. Don't have to, like Mike Steele, you don't need to change your party affiliation to do the right thing for the country. So I thank you. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your energy, and I thank you for your insight, my brother.
Hey,
really
my
appreciate
friend, my friend, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and have a conversation. I always enjoy it. And look, I'm proud of how you're withstanding the bullshit that you have to go through. People don't understand the toll it takes on family, the toll it takes on trying to, reorient your life after all of this. And so
not easy.
It's not easy, but I just want your listeners and those who give a damn to know that, in the face of all of that, you're standing true, and that's important. So appreciate you for that.
And I appreciate you. Thank you, my friend.